My name is Alex, I'm 30. I work in software development, used to be a freelancer, took on anything from websites to database integration for small businesses. 5 years ago, I caught a break. I landed a contract with a large logistics company, built them an internal platform, and that gave me my startup capital. A year later, I founded my own IT company. At first, there were just 3 of us working from a co-working space. Now we're a team of 12 with our own office and steady clients. I was never the type who dreamed of being an entrepreneur. It kind of just happened. But it turned out I actually liked being at the center of decision-making. I'm used to taking responsibility, I'm not afraid of risk, and I enjoy building systems from the ground up. I wrote the first versions of our product myself, did the first client presentations. This company, it's my baby. And at some point a couple years ago, I started to feel like I'd finally landed on my feet. My dad had been watching all this from the sidelines. He used to work as an engineer at a factory, 8-hour shifts every day, solid paycheck, regular weekends. We were never particularly close, but I always respected him. He didn't talk much, never gave unsolicited advice, just did his job and expected I'd figure out my own way. I think when he retired at 62, he got bored. He called me one evening and asked to meet. It was summer. I remember we sat at a cafe near my place, drinking coffee. He asked how things were going, and then kind of awkwardly said, "If you ever need help at the office, I could do something, just to stay busy." I was surprised. He'd never shown much interest in IT, and computers were always kind of alien to him. But he looked sincere, and something stirred in me. Maybe this was our chance to finally work together. Share what I'd built, let him feel proud of what I'd accomplished. I talked it over with my wife. She wasn't thrilled, but said, "If it matters to you, go for it." So I told my dad he could start coming in a couple days a week, help with paperwork, office supply orders, logistics. Easy stuff, no pressure. We didn't make it official at first, just informal, family help. He agreed and showed up that Monday morning. That first week was honestly kind of sweet. He'd come in early, unlock the office, bring coffee for everyone, crack jokes about kids with laptops, sit with some forms, and ask me how Google Drive worked. My team was skeptical at first, but then started to warm up. To them, he was like this friendly grandpa with a flash drive and a notebook. I felt proud, like, hey, my dad's here, working with me. My mom would text things like, "He's so excited, I haven't seen him this lit up in years." And I really did feel happy. We even started having lunch together. Once a week, he'd pick me up and we'd go to this grill place, his favorite. He'd tell old factory stories, I'd explain how startups function. Weirdly cozy moments. We didn't talk about the past or my childhood, just sat together. I thought, maybe this is it. Maybe this is what we both needed all along. I started thinking maybe he could handle something more involved. He asked, maybe I can help with hosting orders, or be in charge of supplies. I can do reports, I used to work in Excel. I agreed. Figured, why not let him try? I gave him some tasks, set him up with logins, explained the CRM. Asked our managers to be patient if he got confused. And that's when things started to get tense. At first, he asked a lot of questions. Then, the same ones, again and again. He mixed up client names, didn't understand why we used Notion or Slack. He did everything on paper, asked us to print things out, just in case. Staff started joking, still friendly, but with a tone of fatigue. Once, he sent outdated invoice info to an old client. I fixed it, but noticed I was getting stressed. For the first time, I thought, just wait. He'll adjust. He's worked differently his whole life, he needs time. And he was trying, that much was obvious. I couldn't imagine this would become a problem. I didn't want to admit that my own father might have been a mistake. At that point, I told myself it was just unfamiliarity. Temporary friction, or maybe I just didn't want to face the truth. Because it would be too hard, emotionally, morally. And because I still wanted to believe that I'd finally done something right for my family. Naive, I know. I try to be a patient person. Especially with family. Especially with my father. But after a couple of months, it became obvious. This wasn't about him adjusting, like I kept telling myself. He just wasn't managing. It started with small things. He downloaded the wrong version of a supply order, outdated dates, missing items, and we had to wait an extra week for the right equipment. It threw off a key internal deadline. I sighed and fixed it myself. Then he lost an email from a client with important technical specs. Just didn't see it, even though we use a centralized system and his email was connected like everyone else's. The client wasn't happy. I had to smooth it over. I tried to talk to him gently. Sat next to him and said, "Dad, maybe we can set up notifications so you don't miss anything important?" He frowned and snapped, "I can figure it out. I didn't leave my brains at retirement." That was the first time I heard irritation in his voice. Before, he'd just nod or joke it off. This time, it felt like I'd insulted him. The next day, he came in and dramatically laid a printed client list on the desk and said, "I've decided to do everything manually. I'm tired of getting lost in your systems." I didn't say anything, just nodded, but inside, I was boiling. My team started getting nervous. Especially Anna, our account manager. At the end of the day, she pulled me aside and said, "Alex, I don't know how to say this, but your dad's making things harder. He gives clients outdated contracts, argues with me when I try to explain how we normally do things. I don't want to complain, but it's starting to affect my work." I thanked her for being honest and promised I'd handle it. The second real issue came a week later. My dad took a call from a potential client, didn't write down the number, and got the company name wrong. We waited days for feedback that never came. When I asked him about it, he said, "What am I, your secretary? I'm supposed to write everything down now?" I lost it, said, "This is your job. I trusted you with this and you're treating it like a hobby." He stood up, looked at me, and said, "Well, write this down, I'm not your employee." We didn't speak for 2 days after that. Of course my mom found out. She called me one evening and used that special tone that immediately makes you feel like a kid again. "Alex, I get it, but your dad's trying. Just be more patient. It's not easy for him, you know that." I stayed quiet. She continued, "He's not doing this for the money. He just wanted to be near you. Please don't push him away, okay?" Those words hit hard. The guilt came rushing in. But how'd I explain to her that being near me doesn't mean wrecking what I've built? How'd I tell her that her husband, my father, who always seemed so capable and reliable, had become the weakest link on my team? The next day, I pulled myself together and talked to him again. Calmly, without blame, suggested that maybe he should focus just on logistics, supplies and deliveries. Less client contact, fewer risks. He listened quietly, then said, "I get it. I'm a problem. Thanks for letting me know." And he left the office. Just stood up and walked out. He came back the next day like nothing had happened. Acted like we'd never spoken. But he wasn't smiling anymore. No jokes. He just did tasks silently, and every time I walked by, he wouldn't meet my eyes. The team started avoiding him. I could feel the tension in the office shift. Everyone seemed on edge, careful not to ask him for anything or assign him tasks. And he, in turn, pretended to be busy, flipping through papers and drinking tea. The real tipping point was an argument with Misha, one of our junior developers. Misha asked what happened to the tech order request that Dad was supposed to handle. My dad replied that he didn't have to answer to school kids. Misha fired back something sharp, and they both walked away pissed. Later that day, Misha messaged me privately. "I can't work in a company where adults get into shouting matches over nothing. This is unprofessional." My wife said, "Alex, this is affecting you now. You've been tense and irritable. Maybe it's time to make a decision?" I nodded. But what decision? Fire my own father? I couldn't even say the words out loud. It wasn't that I feared his reaction. I feared who I'd be after that. Afraid I'd break something permanently. Something that couldn't be fixed. One day, my dad came up to me and said, "I know I don't fit in. I'm from a different generation. We work differently. You guys have clouds and chats and apps. I'm old school, son." He said it calmly, without bitterness. And I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But pity isn't a foundation for teamwork. I knew that. I just wasn't ready to admit it yet. I started every morning with a sense of dread. Not because of projects, not because of clients or the market, because of my dad. I'd walk into the office and never know what I was going to find. Quiet compliance or some new initiative that would spiral into disaster. It was wild how someone who had joined the company as a gesture of family support had become its most unstable element. The breaking point came on the day of our investor meeting. It was a big deal. We'd been preparing for a month, compiling every metric, UX analysis, and growth plan. 2 reps from a major VC fund flew in from another city. My team and I stayed late the night before, checking every chart, every slide. I was nervous but confident. If it went well, we'd secure funding that could level us up. That morning, I got to the office a bit later than usual, stopped to pick up coffee, bottled water, and snacks for the guests. Just a small touch to make a good impression. When I walked in, everything looked calm. My dad was sitting by reception, chatting with the 2 investors. He was smiling, joking even. I was surprised, and weirdly glad that he was getting involved. They were already looking at a presentation. I hurried to the meeting room. And then I felt something collapse inside me. They were watching the wrong version. On the screen was a 3-week-old draft, rough, with outdated metrics and broken charts. In that moment, I couldn't even process how it had happened. I just blurted out, "I'm so sorry, that's an old version. Let me pull up the current one." The investors exchanged glances. One of them said, "We've almost finished this, but sure, let's see what else you have." I sat down, hands shaking, and opened the right file from Google Drive. Started talking, but inside, everything was burning. My confidence was gone, my tone faltered. I knew they had already seen numbers we later revised and improved. The flow of the pitch was broken. I felt the air leaving me, like I was watching it all unravel in real time. We finished, they thanked us, and left. Then I went to my dad. Asked, "Which version did you show them?" He shrugged. "The one on the desktop." I figured if it was there, it was the right one. I couldn't speak for a moment. Finally asked, "Why were you showing them anything?" "Who asked you to?" He replied, "They were here, and you were late. I didn't want them just sitting there." My hands were trembling. I went to the bathroom and splashed water on my face. Stared at myself in the mirror for 5 minutes. It wasn't anger or panic. It was the sense that I was about to make a decision I couldn't come back from. That evening, I got an email from the fund. A polite rejection. No details, but I knew. We'd lost them in the first minute. The start set the tone, and we couldn't recover. My team was disappointed. Misha wrote, "Sucks. We put so much into that." Anna didn't say anything. She just didn't show up the next day. My wife said, "You need to talk to him. Properly. Or make a decision. I can't watch you burn out like this." I sat at the kitchen table, silently drinking tea. She continued, "I get it. He's your father. But you're an adult. You have a business. People who depend on you. And every day you avoid taking responsibility because you're afraid of hurting one person." It was harsh, but she was right. I tried talking to him again. No accusations, just facts. This meeting was crucial, and the mistake cost us dearly. He looked at me and said, "I didn't do it on purpose. I was trying to help. I thought I was doing the right thing." Then added, "You told me to make myself at home." Those words cut like a knife. I didn't respond, just walked to my office, closed the door, and sat in silence. For a long time, after that, everything slid further. The team pulled away. People started avoiding any tasks routed through my dad. One developer refused to work on a project if dad had anything to do with client data. It wasn't just dissatisfaction anymore, it was a lack of trust in me. One evening, I stayed late at the office. Most of the lights were off. Just me and my dad. He sat at his desk, flipping through papers. I walked over, sat down. Said, "Dad, I don't know how to do this the right way. But I can't keep going like this. I'm torn between what's right for the business and what's right for the family. And right now, those aren't the same thing." He didn't look at me. Just said, "I get it." Then stood up, put on his coat, and left. Not another word. I stayed sitting in the dark. Stared at his empty chair. One thought kept looping in my mind. If I fire him, he'll never forgive me. But if I don't, I might lose everything else. I can't say exactly when I realized there was no way out anymore. Maybe I'd known it for a long time but didn't want to admit it. I kept hoping something would fix itself. That maybe he'd figure it out on his own and leave peacefully. That I wouldn't have to be the one to say out loud what had been hanging in the air for weeks. But that didn't happen, and like it often does, the moment of truth didn't come from logic, it came from one more mistake. It was Monday morning. I walked into the office and saw red alerts in our system. One of our long-term clients, a major logistics company, had reported that their internal data, which they'd shared with us under contract, had been mistakenly sent to a third party. A chill ran down my spine. We'd worked with this client for 3 years. Their trust was one of our company's pillars. I called an emergency meeting. We started tracking how and by whom the breach had occurred. Within 20 minutes, it was clear. My dad had sent the file to the wrong person, just because 2 contacts had similar names. He didn't double-check, didn't confirm. He clicked send, and that was it. He didn't even realize it until I called him into my office and showed him the screen. He sat down, looked at it, and simply said, "Wasn't that their lawyer? I thought that's who you talked to." I didn't say anything. He added, "Well, it happens. I'll apologize." I stared at him and felt something crack inside me. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even hurt. I was just tired. Everything I'd tried to preserve had been falling apart for a long time. The only thing stopping me was the fear of saying the final word. "Dad," I said, "I can't anymore. I've tried. For a long time. But this has crossed the line." He didn't interrupt. I went on, "You're a good person. But you're not right for this job. You're hurting the team, and me." He looked away. Then he stood up, said nothing, didn't ask anything, just left. That was it. The office was silent. Everyone understood what had happened. No one said a word. Later, Misha quietly came over and said, "Sorry it had to be this way." Anna brought me tea. I drank it without tasting it. My mom didn't call. I called her that evening. She didn't answer. Not that day. Not the next. On the 3rd day, I got a short message. "Don't call right now. He doesn't want to talk to you." I stared at the screen, unsure how to respond. Words ran through my head. I tried. I didn't mean to, but none of them felt right. A week later was my aunt's birthday. Usually everyone gathered at her house. I went, like always. But this time the atmosphere was different. People were chatting, but when I approached, conversations died down. My uncle, who used to talk cars with me, just nodded. My cousin smiled stiffly and left the room. I felt so out of place. I left before they even brought out the cake. The next day, my brother texted, "You could have handled it differently. You didn't have to do it like that." I asked, "How?" He never replied. Anna once said, "You did the right thing. Everyone knows it, even he might know it one day." I nodded, but I didn't feel anything. Just emptiness. Work went on. We revised our procedures, implemented 2-factor checks for all outgoing data. The client whose data had leaked stayed with us, but added extra conditions. We lost a few prospects, but kept the core business. The company survived. No one questioned my leadership anymore. But I didn't feel stronger. Or safer. Sometimes I'd walk past his old desk. It was empty, just a worn notebook and a pen. A few times I opened it and read his handwriting, firm, blue ink. To-do lists, schedules, staff names. Neat, careful. He'd tried. That was clear. He wasn't malicious. He just didn't belong there. My wife would say, "It's not your fault." I'd stay silent, because formally, no, it wasn't. But inside, it felt different. I fired my own father. I said out loud what no one in my family had ever said. And now I have to live with that. More than 4 months have passed since that day. At first, it felt strange. The office seemed quieter. Less chaos, no sudden outbursts, no awkward comments. Just work. We implemented new protocols, fine-tuned our processes, reassigned responsibilities. Everything became clearer, more predictable. The team started to come alive again. People chatted more during breaks, laughed, shared ideas. Misha once said, "Feels like we can finally focus. Without the extra tension." I just nodded. I knew what he meant. We all did. No one mentioned my dad's name out loud. Business picked up. We closed a deal with a fintech company, launched a pilot in the Netherlands. There were even talks of expanding the team. For the first time in a long time, I felt like we were moving forward instead of pushing against a wall. Our financial reports stabilized, and on Fridays I found myself going home not burned out, just tired, in a normal, human way. And yet, I felt like I was walking around with a hole inside. I couldn't explain it. It was like I'd taken something from myself. Rationally, I knew I'd made the right decision. But emotionally, it felt like a blow I hadn't recovered from. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel victory. Just a constant, quiet emptiness. I tried reaching out a few times. I called my dad, no answer. Left voicemails, nothing. Once, I even drove to my parents' house unannounced. It was a gray, rainy day. The pavement was slick and shiny. I stood at the door holding a box of cream-filled eclairs. I remembered he liked those. My mom answered. She saw me and immediately looked down. "Now's not a good time," she said quietly, almost like she was ashamed of herself. I nodded and left. We stood there, silent, for less than 20 seconds, but they felt like the longest of my life. At family dinners, I was a ghost. Present but not included. People smiled politely, asked about the weather, about work. No one mentioned Dad. No one asked how I was. I felt like they hadn't forgiven me. Maybe they never would, not because I was wrong, but because I had said something they all preferred to leave unsaid. Mom still sent the occasional message. "How are you? Saw your interview. Well done, don't forget to eat." Her words carried a trace of warmth, but also a clear distance. One she couldn't, or wouldn't, cross. I responded neutrally, careful not to mention anything that might reopen that wound. My wife supported me as best she could. Told me things could still change. That time heals. But every time I saw fathers and sons sitting together at a cafe, or heard someone say, "My dad helped me move last weekend," I felt a physical ache. I envied them, quietly, secretly, not them, but the version of myself that still believed everything could be held together. Sometimes I'd come home late and sit on the balcony with a cup of tea, staring into the dark. Distant train sounds, the smell of wet wood from below. In those moments, I'd replay everything. The conversation, his face, his silence, the way he stood up, the way he left, and the quiet that followed. I'd ask myself, would things have been different if I'd just waited a bit longer? Found another way? But I always came to the same answer. There was no other way. Just the one I took. It was terrible, but it was necessary. I'd look at old family photos sometimes. In one, I'm 12, holding my dad's hand at our country house. He's in a tank top, smiling. Back then, I thought he knew everything. That he'd always be there. That he could never be wrong. Naive, of course, but it hurt to see just how far we'd drifted since then. Right before Christmas, I got a card in the mail. No return address, but Mom's handwriting. Inside was a watercolor drawing of a tree. The message, "Merry Christmas, Alex. We hope you're well, Mom." No word from Dad, no signature, just a blank space next to her name. Like a pause left hanging. Like silence that had become the norm. I held onto that card for a long time. Then I put it in my desk drawer. I didn't tear it up. Didn't throw it away. Just tucked it out of sight. I didn't want to see it every day, but I couldn't bring myself to get rid of it. I don't know who my family is anymore. The ones who stayed, but with distance. Or the ones who turned away, but still occupy more space in my memory than I'd like. I did what I had to do. I don't regret it, but I haven't forgiven anyone. Not him, not myself, and maybe that's all that's left. AITA?